meeting is being recorded.
Great, and just a final reminder, if you can pop yourselves on mute, that would be great, and should enable everything to flow. So thank you all for joining the Utilities Against Slavery Anti-Slavery Day event. This is an opportunity for us to share insights about our company's anti-slavery and exploitation programs and share practical tips with you. I'm your host. My name is Jessica, and I'm an advisor at Slave Free Alliance and the Human Rights Specialist for Utilities Against Slavery. We're going to start with an introduction to the group and what modern slavery looks like today, then jump into the panel discussion. So Utilities Against Slavery is a forum for electricity, water and gas providers to collaborate on preventing and addressing modern slavery and labour exploitation. We are 20 members in the group, employing more than 100,000 people together. And we meet every 6 weeks where we talk about evolving trends and develop industry best practices. And our commitment really recognises our leverage and the ever-present risk of modern slavery and exploitation in our sector. At the moment, we've got 3 strategic areas of focus, and this is managing supply chain risk, promoting engagement to our agendas, hence this event, and also creating training solutions that we can all use as well. Can we just ask people to pop themselves on mute? And that would be great. Thank you. And at this point, I want to invite everyone to introduce themselves on the chat. It'd be great to say your name and the company you work from. And I know that we've got quite a few Utilities Against Slavery representatives on this event today. So please make yourselves known and engage with the group. Also, as we said before, today is Anti-Slavery Day, and so thank you so much for taking 1 hour of your day to learn more about this important topic. This is a UK National Day, and it is time to reflect on nearly the 50 million people trapped in modern slavery globally, to raise awareness of how it can happen, and also empower people to play their roles. To look at modern slavery today, modern slavery is by definition an umbrella term that encompasses the different forms that one person can exert control over another person to their benefit. As you can see, there's a number of types here. In the utilities industry, forced labour is most likely in the supply chain, but they should also consider when working in communities as well, that they could easily come into contact with people in these other forms as well. And this includes sexual exploitation, domestic servitude and forced marriage. It is also a much wider problem as well. So as you can see here, there's about £130 billion generated in illegal profits around the world by human trafficking. And compared to the 50 million people trapped in slavery globally, only around 90,000 are actually identified as victims. And this is a statistic from 2021. Furthermore, modern slavery is one of the worst forms of human rights abuse, and to address it, we need to consider how we can address all issues of exploitation. So, for instance, in the context of forced labour, these elements can be signs of modern slavery or create a toxic culture where modern slavery can thrive. So, excessive working hours, violence and intimidation, false imprisonment, these can all create that kind of culture and be key signs of modern slavery. And with this introduction, I'm going to turn off the slides and turn to our panel. So I will ask our panel to introduce themselves, and it'd be great to start with Gary.
Yeah, good morning all, and thanks for calling in. My name's Gary Booth, and I'm the Chair of Utilities Against Slavery. If I can pass on to my other colleagues.
Fiona.
Hi, I'm Fiona Scott. I'm one of the Ethics and Compliance Managers that works for Scottish Power, with a keen interest in modern slavery. Write the modern slavery statement, engage in a lot of slavery things, and looking at our modern slavery programme. So thanks for inviting me to talk today.
Fantastic. Lucy?
Hi everyone, I'm Lucy Darler. I'm Senior Supply Chain Sustainability Specialist at Severn Trent, a regulated water and sewage company operating across England and Wales. And my focus is really on how engaging with our supply chain, given the complexity and scale.
And finally, Katie.
Hi everyone, at SSE, and I look after our human rights and modern slavery approach at a group level. And yeah, thank you for having me today.
Thank you all very much. So let's get started, and let's start with company commitment. So we all know that in our jobs and in different projects that initiatives can really easily falter or be limited without the right senior buy-in or understanding of resources available. Therefore, senior commitment is really key. So my first question is for Lucy. What executive buy-in do you have in your company, and what does it look like?
So we're really fortunate at Severn Trent in that our chief exec has a really clear commitment to identifying and addressing modern slavery, and that's so helpful in terms of, engaging our own teams in terms of understanding, their role in identifying and addressing this issue through the work that they do, but also in turn, setting that expectation across our supply chain as well, and that really clear commitment that of the standards that we expect of our supply chain that are working on behalf of us. One of the things that we found really useful a couple of years ago was with Slavery Alliance delivered a dedicated executive session to our executive teams, but also to our board, to really understand the specific risks that are apparent to our business and our supply chain. And they worked through a scenario where they got into the detail of those risks, but also got an understanding of the impact, both from an individual perspective who was at risk of modern slavery, but also the impact of business as well. And that really helped sort of bring it to life for us as a business, and allowed them to kind of, encourage that sort of style of thinking with their teams as well.
Fantastic. And Fiona, how does senior commitment help you to progress your anti-slavery agenda across your business?
I'm probably exactly the same as Lucy, but I'm very, very lucky in the company that I work for, that we've got buy-in from the chief exec right down, but also at a global level, because we're a part of the Iberdrola group that have got a huge focus on human rights. And I think for me, the executive buy-in and the tone from the top is extremely important. And I actually think it doesn't matter what size of organisation you have, it's equally as important in a company that employs thousands of people, has a huge supply chain, as to a small company. It helps you progress. Whoever's got a role within mod, it's everybody's responsibility, but generally in companies there is somebody or some teams that have got more responsibility. So I think it's extremely important to help progress the anti-slavery agenda. It sets your company's values, their ethical climate, and it's just that buy-in from the top, working its way down, is so important to help you progress the anti-slavery agenda. For me, I've got full support, and as a huge company, we are all working towards that. However, as I've said, I think it doesn't matter if you're a small company. I think it's important that your executive, or whoever your chief executive is of your company, understands the importance, and you need to communicate that to them somehow. Hopefully you've got their buy-in, but if you don't, it's getting that message how important and what it means for your company, your reputation financially, the bigger picture. So buy-in from the top, tone from the top, for me, is the most important thing really to help you progress your anti-slavery agenda.
Fantastic. And Gary, do you have anything to share on this?
Yeah, in many ways, I really echo what Lucy's just said there. I've worked with several utilities businesses, and I think the greatest risk actually lies in the utilities supply chains as opposed to their directly employed workforce. And for me, the main reason for that is most utilities businesses are very responsible. They have very robust recruitment procedures, and also their workforce demographics are very much requiring technical skills. And from a criminal, that's going to put you off trying to get somebody into that workforce. I think in terms of those risk categories, then the areas in the supply chain are most at risk. There's a lot of open source information. So in the UK, the Gangmasters and Licensing and Abuse Authority, which is actually a government agency, they've actually identified key categories, including construction, as Susie said, waste management and cleaning services. So some of those software FM services has been exposed to a greater risk of modern slavery. All of these feature across all the utilities supply chains. Also, we have internationally with solar panels, that there's been a lot of media coverage around the risks across there. I think thirdly, and this is me benchmarking the utilities sector against other business sectors, I still think there's a way to go around raising awareness in the utilities. Modern slavery has often been referred to as a hidden crime. And unless there's awareness, it will remain unnoticed. And there are many occasions where people have said, once modern slavery has been identified, it happened right under our noses. I still think that's a potential threat to the utility sector.
Thank you. And Katie?
So yeah, we've identified that our construction sites are a potential kind of high risk area for us, just because I suppose the nature of the construction sector and knowing that it is high risk for modern slavery in the UK, and that can be kind of a route that people are kind of trafficked and kind of held to modern slavery. So we've been working with third-party specialists to come into our sites and do gap analysis to actually identify if the processes and procedures that we have, along with our principal contractors on site, to check that those procedures are kind of, I suppose, robust, and that we're actually doing all the checks and due diligence that we need to do to make sure that, I suppose, nothing kind of can slip through. Some positive outcomes of that were that we found that especially our principal contractors had really high standards. There also seemed to be a lot of knowledge from the principal contractors on our sites. They seem to have a lot of experience with modern slavery and a lot of experience with kind of identifying those issues, which was great to see. So I suppose next steps in that for us is we've been trying to kind of learn from those contractors that we've been bringing in, and now we're looking to kind of build that expertise in-house. So we're soon to be running some training with Slavery Alliance with our SHE auditor teams, who are our health and safety and welfare auditors. We want them to be upskilled on kind of what to look for when they're on site, what types of questions to be asking the workers, and really be our eyes and ears on site. So we're hoping that will allow us to reach more sites and just really kind of embed that in our permanent processes.
Fantastic. And I think what's really good to hear is, you know, you're all willing to learn what's high risk in your supply chains and take action. And, you know, I think a lot of business, you know, the word risk can make businesses quite nervous. It carries a lot of sensitivities and we're never too sure where to start. And Fiona, what's that been look like for Scottish Power? What's made you guys really take control?
I think for me, the word risk can make people very nervous, but I think I can probably sum it up in one sentence, and quite simply, being aware of your risks allow you the opportunity to address them and put the controls in place. If you're not aware, if you don't try and look for the risks in your business, then you'll never have the opportunity to try and, well, fix them. Modern slavery is a huge task, but put controls in to minimise the risk of modern slavery within your business and supply chain. So yeah, I think don't be scared of risk. I think it's really critical that you do identify your risk. I've gone on mute. I don't know how that happened. Sorry, I don't know which bit you got to. I think the opportunity to address modern slavery, and what I said is don't be scared of risk. You need to identify your risk to be able to do it. And you know, whether you've got a kind of now near far approach to addressing those risks, it might be overwhelming the amount of risks that you have in your business, depending on how big your supply chain is. But I think you need to document it and make sure you've got the relevant checkpoints from bringing suppliers on to ongoing management of them. Yeah, so document your risks, don't be scared of them, and have a plan to address them, even if it's just identifying it and you're not quite sure what you're going to do. You know, you need to chunk it up, but yeah, identify your risks is actually your greatest opportunity to actually trying to fix something.
Thank you so much. And Gary, you always play yourself down when you explain your background, etc., but you've got a wealth of experience in this. And can you shed light on any modern slavery cases that you've experienced in the utility industry before?
Yeah, so my background really for the last 40 years, for the first 30 years of those, I was a police officer, ended up specialising in public protection in West Midlands, and the last sort of 9-10 years I've worked with an anti-slavery charity where a lot has been involved in identifying victims and working with businesses to target harden their approach But one example was actually in Birmingham, which was a waste management biomass plant, and they heavily relied on temporary labour to perform security roles, so gate, bring in lorries and general security. I was undertaking a modern slavery site assessment and was accompanied with a health and safety colleague from the business, and she identified that the security guard on that tour of duty just had trainers when actually they should have had PPE footwear. So that actually triggered a potential health and safety red flag. But actually, it was a lot deeper than that when we discussed issues or concerns with the person. It quickly became apparent that he had only just recently been allowed to work legally. He'd been an asylum claimant, and he'd actually come through the then Calais jungle into the UK, and whilst waiting had been working in the grey market. He was a victim of slavery. He was in Birmingham, but he didn't really know where he lived. He'd sort of been given a route and a bus pass, and then it was literally sort of going robotically from home to the workplace, and he was given instructions on this particular day of where to go. In terms of the victim, yes, he was safeguarded subsequently, but actually what that highlighted were some real missed opportunities. The first opportunity was a general lack of awareness of modern slavery. Had that person undergone a site induction where modern slavery was assessed, red flags would have been identified. Secondly, the labour agency, their approach to modern slavery was in effect zero. Effective due diligence in terms of the procurement would have identified that, and again would have helped work with that labour agency to upskill some of their staff, or actually to enable a decision as to does the business want to still work with that business. The positive impact, though, was it was a real learning experience, and that incident was quickly escalated to the executive team, which goes on to an earlier point where the executive team really had buy-in, and they actually turned work into action, and within relatively short term, a change in culture and work practices occurred.
Thank you so much. I think these insights really bring to life what we're doing. So thank you so much for that, Gary. Moving on to collaboration. So as you know, Utilities Against Slavery was formed to enable power, water and electricity providers to collaborate on this matter. And there are many collaborative forums out there as well, including the food industries, the electronics and mining, etc. So for us, it's really a good chance to just reflect on what makes collaboration effective on this. And with this, back to Gary, what are the benefits of collaboration to you?
I think in terms of modern slavery, it's critical. Modern slavery is a term used to describe somebody's misery, where most victims, and practically all victims I've come across, have got some significant vulnerabilities. They need help and they need some support. There is no one organisation which can provide that. And I think that in terms of a victim-centred approach, safeguarding approach, that in itself requires collaborative approach. Non-government organisations working with businesses, businesses working with law enforcement and potentially government. I think as well, the statistics which you said earlier, 49 million victims of slavery worldwide in the UK, 13,000 victims were identified last year alone. There needs to be government influence and leverage. And I think something like Utilities Against Slavery coming together where 20 of the largest utilities businesses really put some muscle on people's arms to actually push the agenda and influence the agenda. I think as well, modern slavery, whilst it's been here since mankind, is probably the last strand of safeguarding and exploitation which people are aware of. We all know about domestic abuse, child abuse, but slavery is one of those where the lid is still being lifted and still being understood. And I think it's important that businesses learn and share best practice, because the one goal is to protect people, it's to protect your workforce, your suppliers' workforce, and importantly, the reputation of not only your business, but also the sector which you're representing. So I think all of those combined make collaboration absolutely pivotal to addressing slavery.
Thank you so much. And Lucy, what does internal collaboration look like for you and Severn Trent when it comes to anti-slavery?
So just picking up on Gary's comment really. You know, this issue is too big for us to address as a single organisation, hence why, you know, we've joined with Utilities Against Slavery, but that's also true internally. So modern slavery or sort of anti-slavery often sits as part of someone's job role, and again, it's, you know, it's too much for sort of one individual to really sort of, you know, build and importantly deliver upon the strategies that would enable an organisation to identify and address this issue. So at Severn Trent, we have set up an internal modern slavery working group, and in order for that to be effective, we've ensured that we've got accountability and representation from different areas of the business that have a key role to play, whether that be in HR, legal, the procurement function, even, you know, through to, you know, communications team, to ensure that we've got that regular sort of drumbeat of awareness comms. That's been really important in terms of building that accountability across the business and ensuring that we're delivering upon, you know, objectives that we've set as part of our strategy. That's not to say that it hasn't been challenging. I think with people, you know, leaving the business, people moving into different roles, keeping that momentum has, you know, it is critical really to ensure that, you know, we continue to move forward. But once that is in place, we've got, you know, the right people in the room, and also those that are, you know, genuinely passionate about this area across the business, who are keen to support you with some of those initiatives as well. For us, that's been, you know, really fundamental, so that it's not one person's responsibility, but it's certainly shared across the business.
Brilliant. And then looking at industry-wide collaboration, so question for Fiona, how has Utilities Against Slavery benefited your company and yourself being the representative?
I guess at Scottish Power, we truly believe that sharing best practice and learning from your peers, and I'm talking about modern slavery, we talk about any subject, but in particular modern slavery, being able to speak freely with, you know, modern slavery subject experts. It's not only efficient, but it also allows you the opportunity to support change across the industry on best practice approaches. It provides really valuable opportunity to assess your own modern slavery programme with others in the industry. Is there something that we can share that we're doing that somebody else isn't doing? Is there something that somebody else is doing that we haven't thought of? You know, it really gives you that insight into, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Let me look at it. Let's see, does it apply to us? Can we implement something similar? And it allows you the opportunity to identify maybe areas of risk you hadn't thought about. You know, speaking about, you'd maybe just not came across that issue, hadn't thought about it, didn't think it applied to you, but actually, wait a minute, that company's quite similar to me. Maybe we do have you know, maybe there is a risk that we haven't identified. To me, that's really, really invaluable. And I think awareness of issues to me is priceless. Allows you also the opportunity to discuss new and emerging legislation. You know, I'll go back a couple of years when the modern slavery statement, you know, we had to, you know, write your own modern slavery statement, and what does that look like? What do you do? Even down to how do you even log it onto the modern slavery register? I know personally I had huge issues the first year, huge administrative issues. But even being able to share that and know that you're not alone is really valuable. It is really valuable. There, you know, when you look for modern slavery, if you want to Google modern slavery, there's a host of information, but actually being able in that collaborative kind of approach, being able to talk to industry experts and talk to peers to say, you know, the government website's great, or, you know, Slave Free Alliance have got a great material. It is really important to allow you to try and cut through some of this. And I think really just being able to learn from each other is probably something I couldn't learn from other colleagues. You know, maybe everybody's got different resources, but yeah, to be able to speak freely with people, and in an environment like this, a webinar, we can learn from each other. So yeah, it's invaluable to me. It's definitely invaluable to Scottish Power and me personally. It's helped me gain a lot of knowledge.
Great, thank you so much. And Katie, what are the benefits for you when it comes to external collaboration?
Yeah, I mean, definitely agree with kind of what Fiona's been saying. I think just to build on that, we've found with Utilities Against Slavery, it's just kind of hearing those honest conversations and hearing people talk about those risks that are coming up has allowed us to kind of consider things that maybe we didn't even realize could be a risk, especially kind of down our supply chain. And there's been actual instances where someone's raised something that they're struggling with. So we've kind of gone back to our business just to double check to see if that's happening to us too. So, I mean, it's kind of, I suppose, just to get a set of extra eyes and ears all the time of what could potentially be going on in kind of your business and supply chain. And I think also in terms of kind of the work that gets done, it really just drives efficiency for us. So like I said before, we've got that action plan that we're working through and we've got a lot that we need to deliver on that. And in Utilities Against Slavery, we've recently split out into kind of the 3 working groups that you covered in the beginning, Jess, and there's some great work that's planned to come out of those. And I think a lot of those are delivering against what we've already worked out we need to do internally anyway. So in terms of driving efficiency for the work of kind of our really small team is great. And also I think the quality that comes out will be better because there's lots of us working on it rather than just kind of me kind of at my desk trying to work out what I need to do for trading or kind of governance and things like that. So yeah, I think it's been really worthwhile kind of having that wider group to collaborate with.
I think it's the key bit, isn't it, Katie? You know, it's about what are our common goals, what are our shared areas that we can come together with, and making sure that all members have a voice and are able to feed into our strategy every year is really, really key to that. So thank you. Final question on collaboration then is for Fiona. So it's great that you attend these events and that you really learn a lot, but how do you share that information across your business?
Quite simply, we have in Scottish Power, we've got a modern slavery steering group. So at a high level, I would share that information so that our modern slavery steering group has all the key business areas. We've got legal, we've got our business compliance officers, we've got internal audit, you know, we've got all the procurement, we've got all the big key management people at that meeting that we can discuss what, you know, I can disseminate to them, it can disseminate down to the business. Obviously, there's some meetings that we might be more procurement focused. I might just simply communicate with our procurement teams, but generally, the way we communicate, not just anything from Utilities Against Slavery, but anything modern slavery, is through our modern slavery and steering group. And we work with them, you know, example being our modern slavery statement. While I might draft the statement, there's so many stakeholders involved, and the people around that modern slavery steering group table are really key to reflect on their part of the business and, you know, their responsibilities and what they've delivered as part of the wider modern slavery programme. So yeah, that's the main way that we communicate. But yeah, we have got lots of ways of communicating. Generally in our business, we've got business compliance officers that sit in each business, and we communicate with them, and they're very close to their business, so they would communicate messages that way. So yeah, I guess there's not one straight communication point, but at the top, the modern slavery and steering group, it would be our main kind of communication point.
Great. So let's look and discuss due diligence in the supply chain. So due diligence activities, and it goes for many different matters, are essential for prevention and also identifying issues. So in the utility sector, the majority of modern slavery risks sit in the supply chain. And Fiona, I'm going to keep you talking, but can you tell me how you carry out due diligence when it comes to modern slavery and labour exploitation when it comes to your supply chain?
Okay, I'll try and keep this. I could talk all day about this, but in our business, we have a very structured approach to due diligence, not just for modern slavery, it's for everything. Modern slavery is just captured as part of that, but you know, we have checks integrated at key points in our process to consider the risks of modern slavery. We ask bespoke questions to assess the risk. We look at information already gathered. We have core terms and conditions in all our contracts, and any variations, if there was any variation to contracts proposed, we need to understand, compliance needs to understand and work closely with the procurement team, the legal team, and key business contacts, what that looks like and what that means for us. I guess we realise we've got a very valuable opportunity to identify potential instances of modern slavery in our supply chain at a very early stage through our procurement process and supplier contracts. So all our third-party contracts, all our third-party suppliers are procured under our procurement policy, which is a very clear and direct link to policy in respect to human rights and supplier code of ethics. Really, there's due diligence from the point of somebody wanting to work with Scottish Power right through to onboarding, right through to ongoing management. You know, there's so much that we do, we just instinctively do, but it's embedded. I think it's what I'm trying to get across is it's not just due diligence up front. We have a very structured approach to due diligence, to the point where we will, once suppliers are on board, we have daily screening. You know, we're looking for, when I talk about modern slavery, we're talking about, is there any adverse media? Is there any concerns? Is there anything at all that we should be aware of? And we will consider those risks at that point in time. Yeah, so ongoing due diligence, yeah, it's part of what we do, and modern slavery is a part of that, and we tailor certain aspects of our due diligence for modern slavery.
Great, thank you. And Lucy, what projects are you carrying out with your supply chain at the moment, and what benefits do you want to see from that?
So similar to what Fiona said, we also have those mechanisms in place in terms of, you know, supplier selection, contractual obligations as well. But over the last few months, we've really focused in again on those high risk kind of categories and tried to adopt an approach where we're gaining some, you know, meaningful engagement with our suppliers to understand what they're doing beyond what they're saying on a piece of paper, and to really sort of test the culture of that organisation to ensure that it's, you know, it's happening in practice. And we do that in two ways, through sort of, you know, in different forms of a proactive assessment, I guess. The first is that we've introduced a values interview stage as part of the supplier selection, by which we ask those that are involved in the tender process questions around that try and understand, you know, their awareness of modern slavery. Do they know what modern slavery is? Not just their, you know, HR representative or modern slavery champion. How are they addressing that within their business? So gaining an understanding of the steps that they're taking, both within their business and across their supply chain, and also gaining an understanding of how they would respond to a potential incident should one arise within their business and supply chain as well. And this is an unprepared interview. So we mentioned that we're going to talk about modern slavery, which seems perhaps a little unfair, but it really gives you a good sense of the culture within that business and how, you know, how seriously they take this, as opposed to a, you know, a nice shiny kind of work winning response that, you know, is hopeful to win work. The second stage of that is that once a supplier is awarded the contract, we then conduct quite a deep dive into their approach, and we again utilise the support of Slave Free Alliance to gain a better understanding of where those potential gaps may be in their approach, and I think importantly for us, understanding where those opportunities for collaboration are. So at Severn Trent, providing that a supplier would, you know, is continuing to engage with us, we would never, you know, stop working with them. Our first sort of approach would always be to work with them, to build their approach, to share our resources and ensure that they're, you know, improving in terms of identifying and addressing modern slavery. So we've just at the start of that sort of approach, and, you know, we've had some really positive feedback, and I think addressing it in that collaborative way, suppliers are much more open and to be, you know, honest and transparent about, you know, where their shortfalls are potentially, but certainly recognize that, you know, ambition to improve in the future. So far it's been really helpful.
Brilliant. And question for Katie. So SSE is focusing on its maritime supply chain at the moment. Can you tell us why SSE chose to focus on this area and how you're engaging with your maritime suppliers?
Yeah, so maritime and specifically kind of workers on vessels has become a big focus for us over the last year. So essentially we identified there was kind of a risk there just because it's a bit of a blind spot for us. So the vessels are working offshore. They can definitely come from kind of variety of countries around the world, and I suppose there's kind of a few things at play which mean they're higher risk for us essentially and reduce our visibility. And I think firstly, it's kind of around kind of the standards that are set globally for maritime. There is the Maritime Labour Convention that's set kind of minimum wage at about $3.20 per hour, and they've got a minimum amount of time a seafarer can be on board of about 11 months, which I think we could probably all agree aren't particularly high standards for us to kind of be looking at globally. So I suppose that's one issue, is that the global standard potentially it doesn't go far enough. And secondly, kind of linked to that as well, the way that the vessels work, they've all come from kind of various different countries, and they will need to abide to the standards in their country. So sometimes they can come over to the UK, and even though they're technically compliant, they're not compliant with what we'd be expecting in the UK. So that's kind of a big risk area. On top of kind of, you know, there can sometimes be multiple nationalities on board, and the vessels can service not only our wind farms, but also kind of go abroad within the same kind of season that they're working and go to other countries and things like that. So I suppose it's just loads of moving parts and loads of different regulation around the world, and it can just be super hard for us to monitor and make sure that the people on board the vessels that are servicing us are kind of living it to the correct standards and being paid the correct amount. So yeah, it has kind of become a huge focus for us, and what we've tried to do is really go above and beyond regulation, so making sure that especially kind of whilst the vessels are servicing our wind farms, that they're doing that to kind of our standards, so that they're being paid the UK living wage as a minimum, and they've got kind of entitled to certain working hours and living conditions there as well. So we've been doing a lot of work and kind of deep diving and speaking to suppliers to make sure that that's happening. The team, because this is mainly kind of this work is mainly happening in our kind of renewables business, and the team have also developed a contractual clause to make sure that's happening as well. And now we're looking at how we can actually audit against that clause. So training our auditors that I mentioned in one of the previous questions, that's also going to include some of our vessels auditors as well, to make sure that we can kind of go on those vessels and actually just, I suppose, reduce those blind spots, because we're making sure that we can see firsthand what those conditions are and speak to the workers to check that they're being paid well and things like that. And also the team are working with Slave Free Alliance on some additional work, so looking to kind of map relevant maritime legislation to understand that better, also looking to map kind of different countries and the regulations there, so we can start to identify where ships have come from, what the expectation may be, and things like that.
Fantastic. A beyond compliance approach is really, really effective, isn't it? And my final question for due diligence is going to go to Fiona. So the pending EU human rights due diligence legislation that's coming in from next year will mandate businesses to carry out due diligence in respect of human rights and also environmental considerations. Now, I know that Scottish Power is owned by Iberdrola, and you're one part of a bigger company. But can you tell us what this looks like for you? What is your company looking to do in view of this legislative requirement?
Thanks, Jess. It's of relevance, the due diligence new legislation, it's of relevance to Scottish Power as part of the Iberdrola group, which has a broad presence in Europe. So really it's got a positive focus on the directive of the group through our human rights function, which sits in Spain. A key part of that is ensuring transparency about what due diligence we carry out globally, and how this consistently incorporates human rights considerations. To support that, Iberdrola this year has published its first human rights report, which sets out the activity of the group over 2022. And this, in preparation, this gives shareholders, a view of the approach, and it also helps us to satisfy ourselves that our due diligence approach is robust in preparation for the directive. So there is a huge amount of work going on at a global level. Obviously, I'm part of the Scottish Power group, but this is actually at a global level. There is a human rights team that is actually looking at that, and they have already started preparing, as I said, publishing the first human rights report. So yeah, there is a lot of work underway, and we will see the output of that through our organisation at a global level.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
So my final set of questions is going to be around practical tips. So the health and safety agenda has been really effective in terms of making it everybody's responsibility and everyone playing their role. And this is what needs to happen for the anti-slavery agenda. So we need to integrate relevant responsibilities to relevant roles, and to the right teams as well. So what initiatives have been successful in embedding the anti-slavery agenda across your business? I'm going to point this towards Katie first.
Yeah, so there's a few things we've done which we've found have been successful. So I think, firstly, one thing we've done is kind of try to make the information and the training that we're giving to our employees as relevant to their role as possible. So we've developed specific procurement training and then another set of specific kind of project management training as well, to try and really make sure that people are engaged. We do also run kind of broader comms and awareness, just specifically around kind of spotting the signs. And I suppose everyone at SSE has a job to do in terms of making sure that they're kind of looking out for things. But we find really that's role-specific training has been far more impactful. And we've had some quite good feedback on it as well from the people who've attended, which is great. And I think as well, in a similar sense, our working group recently has been broadened out to kind of include more people. So originally our working group kind of sat at group level and included various departments, kind of health and safety, procurement, sustainability, and large capital projects. But we broadened that out recently to include more people from various business areas, various kind of areas of expertise. And that's really helped us just to kind of drive that agenda through the business more. So I think it is a balance to strike with those kind of working groups and steering groups is getting enough of the right people on them without them becoming too large, but making sure, I suppose, you're kind of hitting all the right areas of the business. So we've found that new approach has worked really well recently.
Brilliant. And Lucy, do you have anything to add on this?
We adopt a very similar approach to what Katie's mentioned in terms of in training, and really for us it's so important to ensure that everybody across the business, regardless of your role, has some basic level of understanding and awareness of modern slavery, and that may be in different forms. And we take a tiered approach to our training. So we have a 10-minute e-learning module in which all employees are required to complete. We have the exec level training, and then, as Katie mentioned, we also have that tailored training. So we run half-day workshops for those that sort of have more frequent and direct engagement with our supply chain. And as Katie alluded to, that's been received really well. And I suppose the ultimate success story is that those that have attended the training, particularly on the sort of front of house teams, have felt confident enough to share potential concerns over the last couple of years as a result of that training. So for us, that's, I suppose, been the biggest success in sort of those those concerns being highlighted to us. I think the only additional thing just to say is it's obviously great we're talking about anti-slavery during Anti-Slavery Week, but also for us the importance of that ongoing kind of drip feed of comms and awareness, so that it's not just one big bang over the course of the year, is really important to ensure that this issue is at front of mind of those that work with us, and across our supply chain as well.
Fantastic. And Gary, do you have any tips for people trying to embed responsibilities across their business?
Yeah, I think I share Katie's view in that knowledge is key. I think everybody involved in the business and ideally in some of the key areas of your supply chain should have a general awareness knowledge. For example, toolbox talks where operatives go onto site. They are your eyes and ears on the ground, as well as that specific training for people in roles where they are, in essence, the operational front line of the first line of defence, for example, procurement colleagues. I think as well, in terms of activity, it's always good to be proportionate and realistic in terms of what you want to achieve, particularly for some of the older colleagues on this webinar. When health and safety was sort of first introduced and there's a serious approach to health and safety, it takes time to embed. It's a journey, and culture doesn't happen overnight. So it's sort of picking out those areas which are the priorities. I think as well, a tip is probably think, if you can, like a criminal. The first thing criminals do is they operate outside our moral and legal compass. So actually look at where your real threats are. So again, policies are great. They are so important, but actually your criminal won't read policies. They're going to look at the shabby practices which are going on the ground. So it's about having the policies, but effectively ensuring that they are embedded into working practices. And I think finally, to really change culture, it's about everybody embracing it, where it doesn't become a culture, it actually becomes invisibly the norm.
Fantastic. And my final question before we move to an audience Q&A is for Fiona. Do you have any tips for particular teams, so perhaps HR, procurement, etc.? What are your takeaways for them?
I guess to me, modern slavery is everyone's responsibility. You know, it's everybody at different levels, of course. But I think for human resources, it's do you have checks? Do you have your pre-employment checks? I've talked about procurement, and I know our organisation does, but for anybody, I think you need to look at each department and have where is your risky area? Is it employing someone without doing the proper checks? So do you have your checks in place? Do your feet on the ground for our business? We've got engineers going into people's houses. Is there something that they're actually seeing when they're going in to read a meter? Well, I'm saying read a meter, change a meter, whatever. Is there something that they're seeing? So it's at all levels of your organisation. I think ignorance isn't an excuse. I think everybody has a responsibility. The days of it doesn't apply to me, isn't an excuse, because it's every part of your organisation. It tends to be, people think, oh, maybe it's a compliance issue, so a procurement issue. No, it's right through your business, and it's who's the eyes and the ears for us, for Scottish Power. What is it? Is there warning signs? Is there something you don't see? And even out with that, our employees have, to give them an awareness. Obviously, we've got a lot of training and comms, but it's even just out in your own community. What do you see when you're out in your day-to-day life at the weekend? You're not at your work. Is having that awareness. Is there something? Yeah, it's wider than just your organisation. Tips, it's in every part of your business, and I think everybody needs to take a good look at their processes and try and identify the risks and satisfy yourself that you have got appropriate controls in place. And if you don't recognise that fact and try and do something about it, nobody's got it 100% right. That's why we're all on this call, to try and work together to improve it.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. That's the end of the structured Q&A. If anyone has any questions, it'd be great if you could post them in the chat or ask them out, and I'll field them out accordingly. All right, it seems to be that we've answered everyone's questions by the looks of things. Great. So Natalie asked, have any instances been found of modern slavery, and what has been done? I'll open that up to our utility companies first of all. Have you had any concerns in the past? Have you had any cases? Feel free to give numbers. I know that sometimes it'd be quite sensitive to detail them. And maybe Gary, you can run through your experiences after.
I'm happy to give a sort of Severn Trent perspective, Nat. So we have had a couple of potential concerns raised, and both one across our head office actually, and one at our academy, and we detail the details of this within our modern slavery statement. I think it's really important to have a really clear escalation process in place, and we followed that through the different stages and really relied upon Slavery Alliance's support in terms of guiding that investigation and really getting to the detail of the concern that was raised, the response to that as well, and working that through. Fortunately, the two cases the potential instances that were raised were a sort of poor worker welfare rather than necessarily, modern slavery in its more severe form. But we worked really closely with the supplier and also the individual in Slavery Alliance, and again took that collaborative approach to ensure that we were doing the right thing. yeah, that's probably as much as we can share, but I think it's really important to start talking about these instances more often so that others feel, you know, more confident to share those as well.
I think as well, you know, speaking on behalf of all the SFA members, the more that work that we're doing with them, the more cases we're actually seeing. And it's a sign that people have the knowledge and skills to spot it. And that's a really good thing. So don't panic if you have a case, seek the right support, get support, and don't be afraid to talk about it either, because everyone really is in the same boat. We have, Gary, would you like to share on this one actually?
Yeah, I think the message for me is stark. The reality is modern slavery will be happening today in the utility sector, across the utility sector. That's the reality. And I totally agree with Lucy. It's about businesses then having an approach to respond and to respond to concerns of modern slavery, and have a remediation process for victims, but then work to understand the circumstances and learn the lessons from that particular incident. But I think people would be naive to think it's not happening.
Fantastic. We'll take one more question, and this is from Mark. So beforehand, Fiona, you mentioned shareholders. Question for the whole panel is, are you seeing any more interest in this topic from shareholders?
Yeah, I can kick off. Sorry, Fiona, are you going to go?
No, I was going to say I've met you go, Katie. No, you go. Yeah,
I was going to say we're definitely seeing more interest from shareholders and our investors, and it's a subject that's not only coming up more and more, I think, when they're questioning us about kind of wider sustainability issues, but we're also finding that the questions are becoming more thorough. I think they're really becoming knowledgeable in this side of things, and actually it's a huge help to us because I think they're really kind of setting high standards, and we're finding that in order to be able to answer their questions, we're having to raise our standards too. And I think it's been a big part of kind of building out that recent action plan that we've developed, was looking at kind of what are the investors and shareholders asking, and it's really enabled us to kind of push forward. So yeah, lots of questions coming through, and yeah, I suppose we welcome them as well.
Brilliant. With 2 minutes to go, I will say we've got a few more questions in the chat, but if you'd like to email them to info@slavefreealliance.org, we will make sure we come back to you. And we will just summarise now, given we're near the end of the hour. So we're all here to engage, we're here to learn. And with that, stay engaged with us, whether you're a supplier in the supply chain of a utility provider, whether you're a common employee, but also if you're just tuning in to learn more about collaboration and what businesses can do, stay in touch. And if you see anything from Utilities Against Slavery, we've got plenty more in the pipeline for you. So we're starting to produce regular Utilities Against Slavery video briefings, about 3 to 4 minutes long. We've recently done one on the Global Slavery Index report and what that means for utility companies. And we'll have some coming through on the human rights risk in solar supply chains and the UK's approach to modern slavery. We also, sitting with Gary at the moment, have a Utilities Against Slavery toolkit in the pipeline. And we're also looking at the solar question as well. We're looking at a best practice approach, which we've nearly established, and also producing a modern slavery due diligence questionnaire. So stay tuned and stay involved. And with that, how to stay involved? Well, we've got lots of representatives. So we have Anglian Water on board, Cadent Gas, Bristol Water, Centrica. I feel like I'm doing the closing credits on this one, and Drax. National Grid, Pennon Group, Electricity North West, Northern Ireland Water, Northumbrian, Scottish Water, Fiona, SMS, Scottish Water, Severn Trent, South East, and finally, SSE, not finally, United Utilities, Wales and West, South East Water, and finally Amanda. And we've also got the staff team as well. So we've heard a lot from Gary today, you've heard from me, and we also have a coordinator. So if you have any questions, feel free to field them to info@Slave Free Alliance, or get in contact with your company representative as well. And with that, it's time to say thank you. So thank you so much for jumping on board today and spending an hour with us to learn, particularly as it is Anti-Slavery Day. With this, I encourage you just to think about what you've learned on this and make sure you take 2 takeaways away with you as well. What can you do practically and what have you learned? So with that, thank you very much. And just remember, if you've got any additional questions, send them through to us on email.